When I turned 71, the final deal of my life closed at $65 million, the price someone paid for everything I had built from nothing. That night, I chose the most luxurious restaurant in the city to celebrate with my son and his wife. Beneath the golden light, he smiled, raised his glass, and spoke the kind of sweet words every father longs to hear. But after that clink of crystal came a glance cold, fleeting that he thought I didn't notice. And in that single moment, I knew my only son was planning how to kill me. He didn't know someone else was quietly watching, and it was that whispered warning, subtle, almost tender, that set in motion a plan of retaliation, silent, precise, and merciless. A plan that would dismantle, piece by piece, the empire of lies he had built. Before I go on, tell me where you're watching this video from in the comments below. And don't forget to like and subscribe if you believe that a legacy is something built with blood, not inherited through deceit. The restaurant tonight looked less like a place for celebration and more like a courtroom plated in gold. The amber light spilled across the ceiling, soft yet unforgiving. Every breath felt weighted. Every sound struck the air like an accusation. The clink of knives against porcelain echoed like metal scraping in a luxurious morgue. From a distant corner, the wall clock ticked slowly, each second counting down to something no one dared to name. I sat across from my son, Daniel Moreau, and his wife, Elena. The table was lined with indulgence, foie gras, prime beef, French wine, yet every flavor fused into one single taste in my throat: suffocation. Their smiles were too polished, their eyes too rehearsed. Everything was perfect, so perfect it felt unreal. I had the uneasy sense that I was watching a play in which I no longer remembered my lines. "$65 million, Dad," Daniel said, his tone hovering between admiration and mockery. He swirled his glass, the dark red liquid catching the light like a gilded blade. "A whole lifetime just to reach this point, huh? One signature. And a perfect ending." Elena tilted her head, her voice dripping with sweetness so thick it soured the air. "No one deserves this reward more than you. Truly, admirable. Anway." I smiled, the kind of smile a man wears when he's learned how to swallow knives. I nodded lightly and took a sip of cranberry juice, trying to conceal the cold wave rising at the back of my neck. Beneath that tart sweet taste, I recognized something familiar, bitter, sharp, like a lie aged to perfection. I watched Daniel's fingers tighten around the stem of his wineglass, his knuckles pale. The light in his eyes no longer belonged to joy, but to calculation, the gaze of a fox waiting for the chicken to bow its head. Elena placed her hand over mine. Her skin was cold, thin, and slick like glass. Then she pulled away too quickly, too lightly, as if she'd touched something that repulsed her. When the waiter refilled our glasses, I caught Daniel glancing at Elena, a small nod so subtle no outsider would notice. But I'd built my life on reading people's eyes, and I knew there was something hidden in that look. I took a deep breath, telling myself I was being paranoid, that this was just a celebration dinner, that my son could never. But when Daniel raised his glass again, his gaze lingered on my cranberry juice a second too long. I took another sip. A metallic taste spread silently down my throat, and in that instant, I understood this wasn't a celebration. It was an execution, wrapped in wine and smiles. "We're truly proud of you, Richard. Now you can finally rest. Let us take care of you, the way you once took care of the company." Daniel Moreau's voice flowed smooth and sweet, like honey being poured, but beneath it lay something slick and cold, like a velvet-sheathed blade. The sentence hung in the air. "Let us take care of you." It didn't sound like an offer. It sounded like a contract already signed by two conspirators. The restaurant lights dimmed, washing the table in a strange blend of golden warmth and icy blue. The red in my cranberry glass caught the light, glowing like a melting ruby. A piano murmured softly from the corner, each low note thudding like a heartbeat inside my chest. Everything looked serene, yet something inside me was changing slowly, coldly turning the color of forewarning. I looked at my son. That face had once been my pride, the boy who used to ride beside me in my first truck, clutching a tiny toy, smiling wide whenever I landed a new contract. But that boy was gone. In his place sat a man with the eyes of an heir, calculating, unfeeling, and precise. Across the table, Elena Moreau laid a delicate hand on her husband's shoulder, her voice soft as silk. "That's right, Father. You should leave everything in our hands. You've worked more than enough." Her smile never reached her eyes, and in that moment, I realized they were talking to me the way one speaks to a patient about to be sent off peacefully. I smiled faintly, though my heart tightened. I thought of Clara Moreau, my late wife, the one who had seen this coming long before I did. I could see her now in memory, standing by the window of our old home, the sunset washing her gentle face. "Be careful, Richard," she had said, quiet but clear. "He doesn't see you as a father. To him, you're a bank." I had laughed back then, thinking she was being too harsh. But now, in this glittering room of glass and gold, her voice returned like a prophecy come true. The conversation carried on, shallow and polite. They asked about my health, but never listened to my answers. They spoke of the future, a villa in Europe, a cruise, a new Aston Martin, as if everything were already theirs. And I saw it clearly. They had already begun spending the money I hadn't yet transferred. The ache in my chest returned not from illness, but from the wound of betrayal. I had believed tonight would be different, that maybe this accomplishment would make Daniel look at me as a son should. But I was wrong. I wasn't a father being honored. I was a vault waiting to be unlocked. When the main course was cleared, Daniel rose from his chair. "Elena, my love," he said, loud enough for the whole room to hear, "they're playing our song. Would you dance with me?" The music shifted into an old romantic ballad, slow, haunting, like a farewell in disguise. Elena smiled, her crimson lips curving as she stepped into his arms. Under the golden lights, they twirled graceful, flawless, like a beautiful couple at a funeral the deceased hadn't yet realized was his own. I watched them. The sight had once filled me with pride. Now it only made my stomach twist. I remembered the 3 times I had paid off Daniel's gambling debts. I remembered co-signing for this very mansion they flaunted. Their happiness was built entirely from my money and my trust. I turned back to my drink, the cranberry juice my doctor had recommended after my last checkup. "Your heart's still strong, Richard," he'd told me, "but not immortal. No more alcohol, no whiskey. From now on you're a cranberry juice man." I had laughed then, a small sacrifice for a longer life, I'd thought. Now I swirled the glass slowly, watching the dark red liquid circle inside the crystal. The light reflected off it made it look exactly like blood in motion. A thought crossed my mind, fleeting, but sharp enough to steal my breath. Is this the color of the end? I was about to take another sip when footsteps approached from behind, slow, steady, deliberate, like the ticking of a countdown. A man in a security uniform appeared beside my table. He looked about 70, his stance straight as steel, his eyes scanning the room before fixing on me. The light grazed his face, revealing a thin scar at his temple, a mark belonging to someone who had seen more than he ever said. He stopped, bowed slightly, and spoke in a voice low enough for only me to hear. "Mr. Moreau, I think there's something you should know." The music played on, but now each note sounded like metal scraping through silence. I tightened my grip around the glass, my reflection trembling in the red surface. And my first instinct surfaced, clear and undeniable. Tonight, there was something in that cranberry glass that wasn't just juice. "Mr. Moreau," the man said quietly. His voice was deep and steady, calm on the surface, but carrying a hidden urgency that chilled the back of my neck. He glanced briefly toward the dance floor, then back at me, lips moving cautiously as if afraid his own words might betray him. "I don't mean to alarm you, but from the bar earlier, I saw your son. When he came back to the table, thinking no one was watching, I saw him pour something from a small vial into your glass." He paused, lowering his voice to a near breath. "Please, sir, don't drink, and don't let them know that you know." The world seemed to sink. The piano notes snapped off mid-air. The clinking of glasses fell silent. Only the sound of the clock remained, dripping seconds into the air, cold and metallic. I looked at the name tag on his chest. Leo Garvey. His face was calm, professional, but in his eyes there was real fear. The kind that only comes from witnessing evil. He wasn't lying. A wave of ice ran down my spine, spreading to my fingers. My throat went dry. My heart pounded wildly, then clenched, as if an invisible hand had wrapped around it. I stared at the glass of deep red cranberry juice, once a symbol of discipline and health, now glimmering with cruel beauty, like a goblet of poison. Every nerve in my body screamed, "Throw it, flip the table, call the manager, look Daniel in the eye and demand why." But decades of surviving crises had taught me one thing: silence is armor. I lifted my gaze to Leo. Our eyes met for a single breath enough. I gave a subtle nod. He straightened, touched the brim of his cap, and disappeared back into the dimness, leaving behind a cold draft that brushed my cheek. My mind raced, assembling pieces I had ignored for too long. Daniel's impatience whenever I mentioned the will, his repeated questions, that flash of irritation when I told him the doctor said I'd probably live another 30 years. This wasn't just greed, it was shadow. He didn't just want my money, he wanted me gone. The son I had raised, the boy I had loved more than my own life, had just tried to kill his father for an inheritance. The thought was foul and cold, clinging to my throat like mud, but reason wouldn't let me deny it. $65 million wasn't a reward. It was a death sentence, signed with his smile. The music ended. Daniel and Elena returned to the table, cheeks flushed, laughter ringing. They looked disturbingly normal, too normal. My son, the would-be murderer, was walking toward me with a grin bright enough to blind. The cold inside me solidified into something else: resolve. As they sat down, I began the greatest performance of my life. I clutched my stomach, grimaced, and let out a low groan. "Dad, you're a terrible actor," Daniel chuckled, eyes darting briefly toward my cranberry glass. I shook my head, keeping my expression twisted in pain. "No, it's not that," I rasped, letting my breath hitch. "My stomach, cramps, old problem. I think I should head home." Elena immediately slipped on her mask of perfect concern. "Oh my God, Richard, do you need a doctor? Let us take you home." "No, no need." I waved them off. Distance was survival now. "It'll pass. I just need to lie down for a bit. I already called an Uber, it's waiting outside." Daniel stood, reaching to help me. His hand touched my arm, burning hot, almost searing. "You sure, Dad?" "We don't mind." "I'm sure," I said firmly, closing the door on that conversation. I steadied myself on the table. In that motion, my fingertips brushed the glass, tipping it just enough. The dark red liquid spilled, winding across the white tablecloth like blood soaking into a shroud. "How clumsy of me," I muttered. They called for a waiter. While they were distracted, I dabbed the spill with a napkin. The fabric grew heavy, cold, and wet in my hand. Pretending to wipe my trousers, I folded it neatly, slipped it into my coat pocket. The only evidence, the only truth I could take with me. I didn't linger. I turned, walking away. My legs trembled slightly, but my pace was steady. I didn't look back. I didn't have to. I could already imagine the faint curl of satisfaction forming on someone's lips. In the hallway mirror, I caught a reflection. Elena's hand resting lightly on her husband's shoulder. Daniel tilted his head, a brief frown flickering, checking to make sure everything was proceeding as planned. 15 minutes later, I sat in the back of a silent car. The city slid by outside, a blur of red lights like slashes in the dark. My hand stayed in my pocket, gripping the damp napkin. The sweet scent of cranberry clung to the air, sweet enough to make my stomach turn. I wasn't angry yet. Not sad either. Those feelings would come later. For now, there was only a cold, piercing clarity. The trap tonight was meant for me. But with the evidence in my hand, I realized they were the ones caught. This wasn't the end. This was only the beginning. The Uber stopped a few blocks from my house. I stepped out. The door closed softly. The car disappeared into the stream of headlights like a note swallowed by silence, leaving me alone in the night, my hand gripping the truth, still dripping with the scent of cranberry. The streetlight spilled down like a strip of emergency tape. I stood beneath it, clutching the damp red napkin, the proof of a curse folded tight, heavy in my coat pocket. My house was only a few blocks away, its warm light still calling my name. But I couldn't go home. Not yet. Home was where memory lived. And tonight, memory smelled like metal. The photo frames, the vacations, the birthday cakes, all of it, felt like a beautiful painting glazed with poison. Going home now would mean surrendering to pain, letting the shock drown me. Tears were a luxury. What I needed was certainty. I turned away from the soft orange glow of the neighborhood and walked toward the cold white light of downtown, the kind of light that held no memories. In the distance, sirens split the wind. Closer, an air conditioner hummed on a rooftop. The city buzzed, sterile, indifferent. I needed that sterility. I needed numbers. I needed a place where truth was measured in parts per million, not pity or betrayal. I knew the place. A private 24-hour lab hidden in a glass medical complex, discreet, efficient. Moreau Industries once used it for executive screenings. The glass doors slid open, and I stepped into a white lobby. The antiseptic air bit at my nose, leaving the taste of dried blood. Behind a thick window sat a young technician lit by his monitor. The badge on his chest read Benson. I pulled out a zip bag I'd scavenged from a trash bin and placed the crimson napkin onto the steel tray. A small metallic clink echoed sharp and hollow. "I need a full toxicology screen on this," I said evenly. "Organic, inorganic. Tonight, money is not an issue." Benson studied the sample, his eyes expressionless. "Priority 1. Expensive. Fast. Sign here." I swiped my card. "You want everything?" he asked flatly, his voice as calm as an EKG line. "We'll strip it bare. Results encrypted in 3 to 4 hours. No trace left behind." I wrote down a private email and pushed back the form. The printer whirred softly. The tray slid inward. The red cloth vanished behind a white door from ethics to evidence, from red to white, through steel. The sterile waiting room felt suffocating, so I slipped out to a late-night diner, a block away. The neon sign outside flickered, missing half its letters. I ordered a black coffee I had no intention of drinking and sat by the window. The wall clock ticked. The spoon clinked against porcelain, sharp, hollow sounds. "Need a refill, sir?" the waitress asked, weary but kind. "No," I murmured, staring at the white enamel tabletop. "I just need time to freeze." My mind worked the way it used to in the early days of building an empire, modular, analytical, procedural. The first instinct was to call the police. I shut that down immediately. A report now meant public record, immature evidence, and loss of control. Tabloids would camp on my name. My legacy would be twisted. Clara Moreau would be dragged from her rest. The police could arrest a criminal, but they couldn't restore a man's dignity. This wasn't a noisy emergency. This was a precise surgery in a sealed room, not handcuffs, scalpels. I retraced the signs I should have seen long ago. Daniel, as a boy, could lie without blinking. The time he shattered a neighbor's window and blamed someone else, clinging to the lie even after exposure. His teenage years were a series of debts unpaid, indifferent to both money and emotion. I called it carelessness. I excused it. I told myself he would grow out of it. Clara knew better, she warned me. I was blind with hope. A chilling thought locked in place. The vial. Leo Garvey had said, "A small vial." That meant planning, research. He had studied my medical history, chosen a substance, carried it with him, waited for the right moment, and poured it into my glass. He smiled, toasted to my health while my death circled in crimson. The real poison wasn't chemical. It was conscience dissolved to nothing. My phone buzzed. An email. A case ID as the subject line. My heart skipped, then quickened. I opened the encrypted file. The screen turned white-black letters, sterile numbers. I scanned the summary. Substance detected, metoprolol tartrate. Concentration, 2,500 milligrams divided by 100 ml. Typical therapeutic dose, 25, 100 mL. 3 figures. 1 conclusion, A death sentence disguised as fruit. Technical note: beta blocker. Concentration exceeds therapeutic range. Given patient's cardiac history, high probability of acute myocardial infarction within 1 to 2 hours. Presentation mimics natural heart failure. Science doesn't cry, it counts. The report read as calmly as a restaurant bill, only this time, the main course was my heart. I closed the phone. The coffee had gone cold, its steam long vanished. Outside, a truck roared by like a storm caged in steel. Part of me still wanted to believe it was a mistake. That hope burst like a soap bubble the moment I reread the last line of the report. Truth had solidified. I looked out the window. Red, white, and steel flowed past brake lights, lane lines, manhole covers. Dawn was softening the city's edges. I wasn't angry. Anger burned too hot. I chose cold. Cold cuts cleaner. My son had tried to kill me, and now I knew exactly what to do. The time for mourning the boy I once loved was over. It was time to confront the monster he had become. The funeral he planned for me was postponed. From now on, I'm the one writing the script. I didn't call 911. I called the person who knew how to turn evidence into leverage. Victoria Lane's private number. I left the diner. Dawn wasn't rosy. It was the gray of a blade just oiled. Damp rose from the pavement. A garbage truck rumbled in the distance. A lone horn ripped the wind. I walked fast, each step deliberate. My breath measured the pace. Steel in my voice, steel in my stride. The phone rang twice. Lane here. Victoria, it's Richard. I need to see you. Now. No hesitation. My office. 40 minutes. She hung up. The lobby was cold granite and white LEDs. My footsteps echoed like a ritual before an operating table. A private elevator scanned my card. The door opened straight onto the 50th floor, no receptionist, only a glass blade opening onto the sky. The air conditioning whispered, the smell of coffee gone cold. Victoria Lane stood by the floor-to-ceiling window, dawn light haloing her back. 40, broad-shouldered, eyes that calculated risk, a thin smile inherited from her father, Edward Lane, my late close friend, the man who taught me how to lay traps in black and white. Richard, she glanced at me, sharp and quick. You look like you've just come off a battlefield. The war is only beginning. I sat across a dark wood table paper, the most lawful of weapons, spread out between us. I told her everything, the dinner, the smiles, Leo Garvey's warning, the red napkin, the lab, the report. I slid my phone across. She read fast. Her face tightened. Her knuckles blanched. In her eyes I saw more than law. There was the bloodline of an ally. That bastard, she almost hissed. He's crossed the line. She sprang to her feet. Her steps measured 3 paces around the desk, like a compressed spring. First call, the prosecutor. Arrest Daniel before sunrise. Premeditated murder. We have physical evidence and witnesses. This is open and shut. I raised a hand. No. She stopped. No. He tried to kill you, Richard. A public sentence kills the name before it kills the crime. I choose to protect the name. Silence. She looked at me and understood. This was not just law. This was honor. So what do you want? I looked out the window, saw the hunter I was forced to become. I don't want prison. I want eradication. Clean, legal, permanent. Take away the money, the only thing he's willing to kill for. Tomorrow morning he wakes up and finds his inheritance world gone. A slow, dangerous smile tugged at Victoria's mouth, the same vice-like smile Edward used to wear. I understand. This is no longer a report. This is a blueprint for collapse. If justice is a scale, I'll add weight. If it is a blade, I'll sharpen it. She sat, opened her laptop. The window glass reflected on her brow. Paper murmured under her fingers. We need more than a toxicology report. We need the whole picture. Financial, statements, debt leverage, UCC liens, second mortgages, escrows, life insurance beneficiaries. Behavioral, call logs, appointment histories, parking lot cameras, keycard access, spending patterns. Legal, control of medical power of attorney, will updates, and the chain of custody for the napkin from your hands to the lab's sample receipt to the law firm's evidence vault. I'm calling an ex-FBI and IRS team. They're ghosts, tight-lipped, and they love finding the fracture point, the spot you press and everything shatters. How long? 7 days for financial and personal files, the first 3 for immediate debts. As for Elena, I'll flush out her backup accounts and supplementary cards. She leaves lipstick marks on every bill. I nodded. While they dig, I'll play my part. What part? The gentle, naive old father. The stomach ailment, nothing more. I'll dangle the bait. A very large family trust. Daniel will call, I'll open the door, and let his greed walk straight into the trap. Victoria smiled wider. Greed makes you stupid. Classic tactic, never goes out of style. She glanced toward the 3-drawer safe stamped escrow, the velvet-sheathed dagger waiting to be drawn. My father used to say you played poker better than he did, she murmured. You always knew when to hold, when to fold, and when to go all in. I looked at the framed photograph. Victoria as a teen, standing between me and Edward on the fishing boat. A stab of something regret. Grief tightened. Edward would know what to do. She gave a sad smile. He once said you were smarter than the both of us put together. He was right. She stopped typing. A memory clicked like a safety being released. I was 10. You and my father spread the warehouse plans across the living room floor. You were excited. Daniel, 12, sat in the corner, not looking at the plans. He snapped the arms off his toy robot, snap, 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 eyes empty. The memory hung between steel, glass, and paper, an omen we had once ignored. Victoria inhaled and shifted back into war mode. Phase 1, gather. Phase 2, set the trap. You keep them calm and off guard. I'll handle the rest. I stood at the window. The orange rim of the sun cut the horizon. Below, the city woke lights went off as day rose. Up here, the war room shone. I felt no joy, no triumph, only the weight of purpose. Daniel had started the war by pouring poison into my glass. Right here, 40 floors above the still drowsy crowd, his father and godmother were assembling the machine to crush him. Dawn tapped the glass. Down below, the work began. Up here, the sentence was written, only the signature remained. Morning slit through the room between the curtains, a light as cold as a surgeon's blade. Coffee steam rose, bitter and burnt, laced with the faint metallic taste still lingering in memory. The clock ticked. On the table, my phone pulsed in rhythmic vibrations, like needles piercing the air. The screen read, Daniel. I let it ring 4 times, a deliberate hesitation before answering, lowering my voice by half a tone, rough and slow. Hello. Dad. Oh my God, I've been losing my mind. I called every hospital. Elena's been crying all night. Dad, is someone with you? The performance of concern. Overplayed. Out of rhythm. I listened, but all I could hear was the echo of a vial cap twisting open the night before. He was sniffing for suspicion in my every breath. I'd give him exactly what he wanted to smell: weakness. Calm down, son. I'm fine, I said, coating my words with a paper-thin laugh. Just a bit of pain. I saw the doctor this morning. I paused, letting the silence stretch just long enough to tighten the rope around his neck. He said it was indigestion, nothing serious. Too much rich food, too much sauce. My stomach isn't what it used to be. The symptoms mimicked a heart attack, pressure in the chest, shortness of breath. But they ran scans, tests the heart's perfectly fine. On the other end, I heard a slow exhale, air escaping a valve. He wasn't listening to my words. He was listening for what wasn't there: doubt. That's all it was? You looked so pale when you left. The doctor's sure, and so am I said softly, adding a touch of weary age. My body just doesn't run as smoothly anymore, son. I have to accept that. I sighed, a practiced sound, carrying the weight of years and legacy. This was the moment to cast the bait. Last night made me think, I said slowly, each word falling like a coin against a safe. At my age, I've realized time doesn't promise anything. I need to get my affairs in order. Dad, what do you mean? His tone shifted, fear fading, replaced by something sharper. Anticipation. I let the silence hang for a few beats, tick, 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 tightening the line. "This morning, I called Victoria Lane my attorney," I said, deliberately emphasizing the name to make it sound official. "We discussed the estate. That $65 million deal has made everything rather complicated." "Of course, yeah," Daniel replied quickly. The gears in his mind began to turn. I dangled the bait. "I've decided to establish a family trust, a large one. I want you and Elena to be well provided for. I want the money to be a blessing, not a burden. Victoria's drafting the papers." 5 seconds of silence, no breathing. Then a faint dry swallow. Fear of loss meeting the rebirth of greed. "Dad, that's incredible. Really, you don't have to do that. We're fine." Honestly, a polite refusal so transparent it was almost comedic, the kind that slips from someone who's just been handed the keys to a vault. The hook was buried deep now, the line pulled taut. The fish had swallowed the bait hook, lead, and all. "Nonsense," I said gently, layering my voice with fatherly warmth. "You're my only son. Who else would I leave it to? This is my legacy, ensuring your future. That's all I care about." I don't know what to say. Perhaps for once that was true. Words had left him. Only numbers remained. He was living in the future he had been willing to kill me for last night now, thinking it had been handed to him on a silver platter. "No need to say anything." I lowered my voice. "Just stay close, all right? Victoria will need you and Elena to come by next week to sign a few preliminary documents. We'll talk more then. For now, let this old man get some rest." "Of course, rest, Dad. Thank you, truly thank you." I ended the call. Silence fell over the room like a lead blanket. I could hear my own breath echoing off the black glass of the phone screen, a faint, ghostly mirror. I didn't feel joy or pride, only the deadly stillness of a single word accomplished. Done. No knives, no guns, just words. The play had run flawlessly. I had turned his greed into my weapon. Now, he was walking willingly into my design, believing he'd won. He felt safe, triumphant. He wouldn't go looking for danger in the shadows, he'd go looking for a pen. I had bought time for Victoria Lane and her ex-FBI and IRS team to strip his past bare, for me to build the vault of a trap, sealed tight, no exit. The game would now be played by my rules, on my board, and Daniel Moreau he had already lost long before he ever knew he was playing. A week of silence, a week in which the blade in the drawer was sharpened. Days passed to the tick-tick of clocks and unanswered emails. My phone calendar skipped beats. The air conditioning whispered. Mice clicked. Mail chimed. Every sound felt like a shears cutting the thread of time short. I listened to every daily call from Daniel, his voice saccharine to the point of nausea. He cared about my health, my appetite, probed about the meetings between Victoria Lane and me. Each question was a tug on a test line. "When will you sign the first draft, Dad?" Victoria said. "When I say so." "What are you eating? What did the doctor prescribe?" "Less spice, less talk." I played the part with full shoulders, the old father, touched and clueless. I poured him words as smooth as oil. Everything was in hand, it just needed time. He was patient, of course he was. What was another week when, in the theater of his mind, $65 million waited at the end? While I lulled him, Victoria's investigative team moved like sharks through the murky waters of the couple's life. On day 8, an email from Victoria arrived. The subject line was one stark word: report. The body was blank white, with an attached encrypted PDF that opened like an operating room door. Beneath that glare, a black, necrotic ledger of debt was revealed. Not only a financial report, it was the terminal diagnosis of a life. The executive summary began. Unsecured debt total, $830,000. Scattered across a forest of cards, Centurion, black, maxed out. I skimmed. A 5-star resort in Bora Bora, a $20,000 shopping spree at a boutique on Avenue Montaigne, Paris, a dinner in London costlier than the first car I ever owned, not a life a stage. It got worse. They leased a Ferrari for her, a Lamborghini for him, payments 4 months past due on both. Repossession notices already sent. The successful suburban house I helped them with as a down payment. A second mortgage placed 2 years ago had drained the equity I'd gifted them. Both loans were 120 days delinquent, foreclosure looming. Worse still, a series of high-interest private loans not from banks. $500,000. Borrowing to pay, borrowing a prolonged morphine for their financial dying fit. Added up, more than $3 million in debt, not overspending metastasis. Each new loan was another necrotic patch spreading. I leaned back in my chair. The numbers swam. Suddenly the attempted murder, the vile, the perfidious plan all flared under a new focus. I didn't see greed anymore. I saw spreadsheets. And in those columns, my life sat under expenses. 65 million wasn't a jackpot. It was the only lifeline left against repo, foreclosure, and creditors who don't send polite letters. Cornered beasts do anything to survive. I closed the file. Red, white, black spun in my vision. Cranberry in memory, white PDF, black text. I forwarded everything to Victoria. The core's rotten. Dig deeper. 4 days later, another email. Subject: update. I thought I'd hit bottom. I was wrong. The attachment was no longer just a debt table. It was a crime scene dossier, interview summaries, verbatim transcripts, legal audio copies. They had traced how Daniel and Elena planned to use the money they were sure they'd soon receive. My eyes stopped at the names of elite galleries in Boston, Chicago, Los Angeles. My chest tightened. What had those to do with them? First contact name, Elena Moreau. A transcript of a call, an investigator posing as a gallery assistant. Her voice was soft, polished, trained with just the right sadness. Yes, I'm Elena Moreau. My father-in-law is Richard Moreau, you know the company. Unfortunately, his health has taken a turn for the worse. He's not expected to make it through, and the family is arranging the funeral. It's a difficult time. My hand trembled. Not expected to make it through. She spoke of me as a shadow already lowered into a coffin. The transcript continued. My late mother-in-law, Clara Moreau, was an art collector. She left a modest but notable post-war American collection. My father-in-law asked me to handle the transfer. He wants discretion, private sales, to avoid noise and auction fees. Her estate needs to be placed properly. Metadata showed high-resolution photos sent to the gallery were taken in my living room at 3 separate times over recent months. The occasions she'd brought soup, fixed a pillow, checked on me. EXIF matched email logs and call schedules. The chain of custody file was sealed, no gaps. Those images were not documentation. They were templates taken from the heart of someone deceased. An investigator visited a gallery to verify. The owner said, "She told me your father-in-law declined rapidly. She presented herself as the sole inheritor of the collection and wanted us to establish values. She emphasized the utmost secrecy until, in her words, the inevitable happens." The inevitable. 3 words that closed a coffin lid. I left the table and looked at the first painting Clara and I had bought, a small landscape by an unknown artist from an arts market. We paid in 5 installments. Bringing it back to our small apartment, Clara's face had been like dawn. "A window to the world we will build, Richard." My gaze drifted to the abstract panel, a blaze of blue and orange. She had bought it the week the doctor declared her cancer in remission after the first round. "This is the feeling of recovery," she'd said, taking my hand. Each frame on the wall marked a heartbeat. Who sells another person's heartbeats? That estate was not property. It was a map of our emotions. I sat back down and forced myself to read. Elena had inventoried Clara's soul, preparing to convert each brushstroke to cash. I saw them, Daniel and Elena, walking through my house, eyes scouring the walls, not for love, not for memory, but for price tags. They looked at a lifetime's passion and saw loan payments. They looked at Clara's legacy and saw a down payment on a new Ferrari. Murder for money, I could understand that in cold logic. But this was different. It was a violation of a grave. They didn't only want to kill me, they wanted to erase my wife's memory. And Daniel, my son, stood watching, permitting it. A white-hot flash of fury flared for an instant. I exhaled, only cold steel remained. The man who had once sat in the late-night diner, the father who still harbored a sliver of redemption, was gone. A soul that had been sold could not be saved. I picked up the phone. Victoria answered on the first ring. I received the report. My voice returned to the tone of an empire builder, a voice I hadn't used in years. Richard, I am so sorry. Don't. Prepare. Collection complete. Game over. No more adjustments. This is name obliteration. I want to build a wall of consequences so high and so thick they never see daylight again. Understood. Victoria's reply was crisp. We trade courthouse for instruments. Paperwork will do the cutting. I hung up. On my screen, one red word remained. Ready. Outside, the sun rose. Here, the blade had already been placed at the throat. The email arrived. Final report. The blue of the screen sliced the room like a scalpel. The fan whirred, cold as a mortuary. The smell of printer paper was dry and metallic. White paper, black ink, a cold band. I opened the file. First page. A high-resolution scan of a medical power of attorney. A document granting unlimited authority to Daniel Moreau to access every medical record and make health decisions for Richard Moreau. At the bottom, a signature in my hand, the familiar confident stroke, except it wasn't mine. In the right corner, a stamp, received 06, 10:23 a.m. Below it, a clerk's scrawl and a file number. The forensic report read, pen pressure at the letter R and the stroke direction of the M deviate from my norm. A concealed tremor. I have signed my name hundreds of thousands of times in my life. I know every curve and break of my own script. This was a masterful forgery, almost flawless, designed to pass any intake desk unless someone deliberately looked for the flaw. White paper was not innocent. On it, the black ink congealed like a bruise. Investigators note, the form had been submitted to the medical records office of the very hospital where I was treated 3 months earlier. 3 months. This was not a last-minute panic. This was a runway begun well before the $65 million deal closed. Next page. The hospital access log sealed copy of the chain of custody. Lines listing every record Daniel had requested by that forged authorization. Complete cardiac history. Latest stress test results. Current medication list, dosages, side effects, allergies. He had in his hands an operational map of my body's vulnerabilities. And it didn't stop there. The final section contained search history extracts from burner phones and public library terminals, all tracing back to Daniel. Arranged by timeline. Week 1. How to obtain parents' medical records. Week 3. Drugs that induce rapid cardiac events. Week 4. Odorless beta blockers, over-the-counter sources. Week 6. Lethal metoprolol dose for a 200-pound male with cardiac history. Week 7. How to fake a natural death. Will an autopsy reveal metoprolol overdose? Each query was a brick paving the road to the cemetery. I read it twice, then a third time. Silence. The gun was still warm. The framework of the crime closed. The instrument was a forged power of attorney, the intent embedded in the search history, the act recorded in the toxicology from the restaurant. 3 arms of the same monster. I leaned back. For the first time, the full scale of the monster revealed itself in brutal clarity. This was not merely a child who wanted his father dead for money. This was a cold architect operating an assassination diagram. He had studied the map of my body like a general reading terrain, picked the right flank, and struck a single thrust. He didn't shove me off a cliff. He measured the wind, set the angle, changed the rope, and cut the right strand. The intimacy inverted into shards, the data the doctors used to keep me alive. My own son used to ensure I'd die with neat symptoms listed on a report. This was no longer family tragedy. This was a targeted campaign, and the terrain was my body. At that moment, all remnants of the boy I once knew turned to cold ash. Daniel Moreau was no longer my son. He was a stranger, a calculating beast who viewed me as an obstacle to be removed. The 40-year cord snapped cleanly, irreparable. Rage extinguished, replaced by something cold and hollow, certainty. No more questions, no more doubt, only an ending. The time for investigation was over. Now came action. I dialed Victoria Lane. You see it? Her voice taut as steel. I see it, I replied. Steady, flat, the voice used to close deals. The voice of a man about to win. Enough evidence, enough chain, enough motive. What do you want, Richard? Not a trial, a verdict. Place the main meeting for Thursday. Announce it as the formal signing for the Moreau Family Trust. Tell them to prepare to celebrate. I looked out. The sky lay flat as a blade. Time to read the will, if you prefer that term, I said slowly. Except the only thing I plan to give my son is the truth, every final piece of the case. On Thursday they would step into a room of white light. They expected a signing. They would receive a sentence. Gray light spread across the table like a surgical blade, glass, steel, sterile light. The hum of the air conditioner filled the silence. A vent breathed softly, the scent of polished mahogany mixed with paper. The clock ticked each second, clawing against the glass walls. The sky was the color of slate. I stood by the window of Victoria Lane's 50th floor conference room, looking down at the city cars moving like metal insects, purposeful and unaware of the legal surgery about to take place above them. The room was designed for power. A long, dark mahogany table, polished to mirror the gray sky, 12 high-backed leather chairs standing like silent guards. On the table, a tall glass water decanter misted with condensation, glasses lined up neatly, square-folded white napkins, and one metal fountain pen heavy as a knife handle. Victoria and I had been there an hour early. We didn't talk much, no need to. In front of her were 5 green folders, perfectly aligned, the calm precision of a surgeon before the first incision. My fingertips found a tiny scratch on the table's edge, years contrasting the brand-new shine they were about to bring in. 11 o'clock. The door opened. Click. Daniel Moreau and Elena swept in as though the room already belonged to them. His tie was pulled too tight around his throat. Her pale dress cut a streak of brightness through the gray palette. A faint trace of red lipstick marked the rim of her glass as she sipped. They carried with them the misplaced energy of triumph into a ritual of ice. "Dad!" Daniel strode forward to hug me for the first time in 20 years. I stood still, arms at my sides, the scent of expensive cologne of greed. Elena brushed a kiss against my cheek. "Richard, you look wonderful." Her eyes flicked toward the green folders, greed glimmered, then vanished. They greeted Victoria casually, like she was there to handle paperwork. They sat across from us, fingers interlaced, smiles rehearsed the about-to-be-rich expression. Daniel leaned back, trying to look in control. "Big day, the signing of the Moreau Family Trust. It sounds like a legacy," Elena cooed softly. I looked at them as a scientist studies a specimen. This was the final scene of blissful ignorance. I recorded those smiles one last time. The assistant poured water. The door closed behind her. Click. The trap sealed. Victoria sat upright, hands framing the folders, staring at them long enough for the air itself to sour. Their smiles began to stiffen into masks. Silence on purpose. The clock ticked, tick, tick. "Thank you both for coming," she said, her voice clear and sharp. "Before we sign, there are a few preliminary matters." She nudged the pen toward them like a judge passing judgment, then opened the first folder. The sound of the paper turning was soft, yet cutting. Item 1. Toxicology. She slid the report across the table. Metoprolol, times 25. In the right corner, stamped, received 10-23A MGVTOX1172. Victoria read with surgical precision. Nearly certain fatality for a patient with cardiac history comparable to that of Richard Moreau. Daniel stared at the black letters on white paper. Elena looked from him to me, radiance cracking at the edges. The glasses of water began to sweat. The second folder opened. The light reflected off its glossy surface. Item 2. Consolidated financials. She slid the thick stack forward. MLFIN 8821. 2 mortgages, both 120 days delinquent. Repossession orders for 2 vehicles pending. Total unsecured debt, $3,150,000. Escrow transfer filed, foreclosure scheduled next month. Color drained from Elena's face. Her hand withdrew from Daniel's as if scalded. I don't, this is, she stammered. The third folder opened. The sound of turning pages filled the air. Item 3. Transcript of a call made by Elena Moreau to Ashcroft Gallery, London. Victoria looked directly at her. My father-in-law's health is declining. He won't make it. He entrusted me with handling the art collection privately. A flash of blue and orange from Clara's painting flickered through my mind. One heartbeat. Daniel turned to his wife, disbelief, fighting with accusation. More condensation formed on the glasses. The clock ticked again. Fourth folder. The final strike. Item 4. Copy of the forged medical power of attorney submitted to Street. Alban Memorial Hospital 4 months ago, time-stamped 10:23 a.m., accompanied by search logs from a burner phone. Lethal dose metoprolol. How to fake a natural death. That was it. The picture closed. The room fell silent as a tomb. Daniel and Elena turned to stone. The future they had toasted to was dismantled piece by piece on the table before them. Elena found her voice trembling. No, this isn't. It's a mistake. I spoke. Low, few words. A verdict, not an explanation. There is no trust. Every flicker of hope extinguished. Victoria followed. 3 clean cuts. The trust is named the Clara Moreau Foundation. Mandate: emerging artists, animal rescue, and wildlife preservation. Status: legally recorded last week. The entire $58 million has been transferred into an irrevocable trust. Neither of you will access, control, or touch a cent. Elena let out a sound halfway between a sob and a choke. Daniel sat, frozen eyes hollow. I placed my hand on the table, feeling the old scratch beneath my palm. Then I spoke, slow and surgical. You have 2 options. Only 2. Listen carefully. Option 1. All files go to the district attorney. Arrest warrant issued, conspiracy, fraud, attempted murder, cuffs, cell door. Option 2. You sign. Relinquish all present and future claims to my assets and Clara's. Vacate the house. Its mortgages have already been acquired by a holding company controlled by the Clara Moreau Foundation. You leave this room and my life with 1 suitcase each, permanently. A second silence. Only the air conditioning breathed. The fountain pen lay in the center of the table, its blade waiting to be lifted. Daniel swallowed. A pulse twitched in his neck. His fingers tapped the chair arm. 1, 2, 3. He reached for the pen. The nib scratched the paper, ink spreading like dark blood. At the first letter, his hand faltered, then dragged out a crooked line of defeat. He passed it to Elena. Her shoulders collapsed. She dabbed her lips, smearing her lipstick, her elegant image dissolving into gray streaks. Tears fell onto the page, smudging the ink. She signed. Victoria gathered the documents, stamped, escrow filed. She slid the pen away from their side. The ritual was complete. They stood, mechanical. They didn't look at me. They drifted toward the door, leaving behind their greed, ambition, and the entirety of their future. The door closed. Click. In the room remained only the sound of folders snapping shut. No victory, only the stillness that was necessary. 4 months passed. The city shed its skin. Golden leaves fell, making room for new buds to bloom. I left the old house, the one heavy with silence and memory, and stepped into a new space, bright and alive. A small gallery in the heart of the city. The scent of fresh paint mingled with coffee drifting from the cafe across the street. Footsteps soft as whispers, voices low, a faint melody in the background, one of Clara's favorites. Light poured through the glass ceiling, scattering across the polished concrete floor in shards of colored glass. A streak of paint had dried at the corner, the past dissolving, soaking into the present. On the walls hung bold paintings, heartbeats of youth pulsing in rhythm with the music. This was the opening night, sponsored by the Clara Moreau Foundation. A young woman stood beside me, her fingers still stained with paint. Her eyes gleamed, her voice soft yet steady. "I painted this after my mother passed away. I just wanted to prove that pain can turn into light." I looked at the brilliant green bursting from the dark background. For a moment, I saw Clara there, her smile shimmering right in the middle of those colors. I listened, truly listened, and smiled. A real smile this time, one that reached the corners of my eyes. Strange, warm. Across the room, a display board showed photographs rescued dogs and cats funded by the Foundation's first grants. Next to them, art students painting outdoors on their scholarship stipends. The metal plaque reading Clara Moreau Foundation caught the light and shimmered like a blessing. That was when I understood. Legacy doesn't live in possessions, it lives in the lives we touch. I once believed legacy was a torch of wealth passed down through blood. I spent my whole life forging that torch for my son. I was wrong. True legacy is the opportunities we plant in others, the goodness that keeps growing even after our names fade. By reclaiming the money Daniel was never worthy of, I gave him the only thing money could never buy, the chance to build a life of his own, through work, through integrity, not inheritance. Whether he takes that chance or not is his choice. I've heard he's working as an accountant for a small firm in the suburbs. Perhaps, for the first time in his life, he knows what it means to earn something. I don't need to know more. What matters is this. We turned what greed made dark and ugly into something luminous, turned a son's betrayal into a young artist's first exhibition, turned poison into color, turned a potential inheritance into real opportunity for hundreds I will never meet. I honored Clara in a way selling her collection never could not, by trapping her spirit in a quiet house, but by letting that spirit breathe life into others' dreams. I didn't find peace in revenge. I found it in purpose, in the red strokes of paint that once echoed blood but now pulse with life on canvas, in the sweat of young hands shaping beauty out of ashes. I touched the frame of a painting and whispered, "We're home, Clara." If this story touched you, leave me a comment below. The legacy I want to leave behind is, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video, because every ending worth living deserves to open into a new beginning.